Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if this is your first time visiting. My name is Dan, I am a mature student with the Open University and I am currently studying the first module of a history degree, which is the module A111, Discovering the Arts and Humanities. If you've watched my previous videos or you're studying the degree, you'll know that A111 is an interdisciplinary module and you study a number of different subjects, not just history. There's about 8 different subjects that you will study in part throughout the whole module. So this video is going to concentrate on units 4, 5, 6 and 7. So that is the second half of the first book, which is the reputations book. Nearly called it traditions, but that is the second book. So I'm going to briefly run through these units, as the first video was quite long and I went a bit too in depth, and I don't want to spoil the content of the module just in case you are planning on studying it or you are studying it, because you're going to know the details of the module if you're studying it. So yeah, I don't want to ruin it, I don't want to bang on, I don't want to make these videos too boring. So firstly, unit 4 is about Mozart, and as you can probably guess, it is a music unit. So unit 4 is actually quite different compared to the first 3 units and also going forward to the other units, whereas you can study it either from the book or from the online material. So the other units, you kind of study the book first, the chapter in the book, and then you'll be redirected to go back to the module website and finish off a few activities on there to enhance your learning. Whereas unit 4, you can either study it fully from the book or from the module website. The content is exactly the same. The difference being, if you're going to study offline like I like to do and do it from the book, you need to download a number of different tracks because it is a music unit and you need to do some listening to, funnily enough, Mozart's music. So helpfully on the, not under the resources tab, under the resources tab you can download each track separately, but because there's about 28, on the module website, when you go into Unit 4, there's a little link there and that will take you to a zip file where you can just download all the tracks in one zip file, which is what I did. Very easy, simple to do. And then you can listen to them offline as you're directed to in the book. It will say, now listen to this track, now listen to this track. Obviously, if you're working online and you're doing it from the module website, it will just have the link there for you to listen to as you come across the activity. So that's just one thing to note. You can either do it from the book or online. The content for this unit is exactly the same. You don't have to finish the chapter in the book and then go onto the module website. It's all either in the book or online, or like I did a kind of hybrid mixture of both. If I was at work studying offline, I'd do a bit in the book, and then if I was at home, had some free time, I'd then go onto the module website. So it's fairly easy to switch between the two. So as this is a music unit, you are doing some listening to Mozart tracks. It's not full track, so there's no need to worry, you're not going to spend hours and hours listening to Mozart. The tracks vary from like 1 minute in length up to like 6 or 7 minutes in length, and that's kind of the longest. Some are like mostly 2-3 minutes. So it's not terrible. It's not like at first I thought, oh my God, I have to listen to so much Mozart. It was fairly interesting. So you start off the reading by a little background knowledge on Mozart, how he was a child prodigy, how his sister actually was also quite, not famous as it were, she was quite famous as a child prodigy. Like both her and Mozart with their father or mother would be touring around Europe to give concerts as children. However, Mozart's sister isn't as famous nowadays, because back in those days, back in the 18th century, obviously being a woman, when she got to a certain age, the father, who was sort of their educator, who taught them not just music but other subjects as well, when she got to a certain age, their mother took over and started to teach her more womanly things like cleaning and cooking and how to be a good wife. And unfortunately, none of her music or compositions are still surviving today. So her name was Maria Anna, or Nannerl for short, or which was her nickname, which they called her by. So you read a bit about her, you read about Mozart's upbringing. It is quite interesting, actually, to be fair, from a historical point of view. So where the listening to music comes in, so first you kind of listen to a few tracks to kind of see if you can work out the different beats. That's what I'm calling it. I don't know what the official word is. I wasn't paying much attention. But so one will be quite quick, like, and then one will be a bit slower. Yeah. To be honest, if you're not into music, you probably skip this unit. I wanted to do it because I wanted to see what it was like, but going forward I might not complete the whole unit if it's a music unit. Anyway, it is still quite interesting. After that, you kind of then listening to see if you can differentiate between different types of music when you're listening to Mozart. So for example, there's symphonies, there is concertos, arias and sonatas. So you learn about the difference between what differentiates them. So a symphony being a large scale piece for an orchestra. You've got the concerto, which is a contrast between orchestra and solo instrumental. So you'll have, which Mozart did quite a lot of. So you'll have a grand orchestral piece going, and then it will kind of go into an instrumental with the piano or the harpsichord, and then the orchestra would come back in, and then it would go to the instrumental again. So you're listening to different pieces of music to see if you can identify, is it a symphony, is it a concerto, is it a sonata? And you also get to read about each different composition and when Mozart kind of had his inspirations for each, you know, when he moved to certain places, he would then compose different things, something like that. Anyway, sorry, it's not too much detail. I wasn't that interested. But that's the gist of the Mozart unit. It's still quite fascinating. So Unit 5 is on a philosopher called Mary Wollstonecraft. I think I mentioned in a previous video, this is actually the only person in the Reputations book who I hadn't heard of before studying the module. But she's actually quite a fascinating character. And being a philosophy module, I really wasn't expecting to enjoy it or like it, but I actually did quite enjoy it. Once again, I was, not for most part, but for a lot of it, looking at it from a historical point of view, because she was a historical figure from a couple of 100 years ago, from the 18th century. So you start off by looking at her sort of upbringing, you learn about how she got into philosophy, and also a little bit about her life, which was a little bit tragic towards the end. You know, she was, although she was campaigning for women's rights and equal rights for all, she still kind of longed for that love from a man, and you know, she'd write about wanting independence from being compared to men. At the same time, she was kind of longing for that love from a man or someone. And you read about a time where she chased a guy over to France, I believe it was. And he wanted nothing to do with her once she fell pregnant. And then she met probably the love of her life near the end of her life, who took on her child as his own. But unfortunately, she died very shortly after giving birth to their child. So it's all very sad. But you realise also, or you learn, that child that survived was Mary Shelley, who is the author of Frankenstein. And you look at certain bits from Frankenstein to see if there's a connection between that novel and the work of Mary Wollstonecraft. So you look at Mary Wollstonecraft's book, A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, and what her central argument was in terms of equal rights for all and why they were lacking back in the 18th century. You also compare what she thought and her argument against those of Rousseau, who was a French philosopher. And they agreed on quite a lot. And actually, you learn that Wollstonecraft was actually not a fangirl of Rousseau, but you know, was a bit of a fan because he wanted equal rights for all, but he just wanted equal rights for all men. When it came to the subject of women having equal rights, he had a very different stance. And when Mary Wollstonecraft found out about what Rousseau thought about equal rights for women, she obviously retaliated with her version of what she thought. So you look at the argument based on a nature versus nurture, whereas Rousseau thinks that women are who they are because of nature. They're just born to be, you know, not as good as men. They're born to want to dress up nicely and please men, and they're, you know, it's all in their nature. Whereas Wollstonecraft argues that actually no, it's nurture. Women are kind of enforced into acting in a certain way to please societal standards which are inflicted on them. And she uses Rousseau's own argument against him where, excuse me, dog fluff, where he argues that obviously it's all nature that women are like this, But in his book, he also says that women need to be enforced from an early age to like dolls and dress up and be pretty for their husbands. And she's like, well, you know, if it's nature, why do they need to be forced to do it if it's natural? So that's quite interesting to go through that. So as I said, she had a bit of a sad life towards the end, but she kept a lot of what happened to her private, especially because she was well known for her views on equal rights for all. And then the guy that she was with at the end of her life thought that she would want what happened to her to be publicised after her death, to let people know what she went through, and you know, because he thought that she was a realist and she never held back. So he published a memoir of her life, including all the gritty details about her following this married man to France and him dumping her having a child out of wedlock. And obviously that had a massive backlash on the reputation of Mary Wollstonecraft, and actually her book, which was quite popular at the time, fell out of print for almost 50 years before it became popular again, with more recent arguments about, you know, equal rights for women, especially sort of early 1920s, when women started to get the right to vote. Jesus Christ, what's wrong with me? You get the picture. And so finally in the module, as I mentioned, Mary Wollstonecraft's daughter was Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein. And you look at whether there's connections between the novel Frankenstein and the work of Mary Wollstonecraft. So was Mary Shelley at the time of writing Frankenstein thinking about the vindication that her mother went through once the memoir was posted, obviously after her death? You know, she was saying that women shouldn't, you know, abide by these societal norms, that they should be, you know, worshipping the men and they should fight against that. But if you fight against that, are you going to be sort of victimized and, you know, separated from society? Almost like the Frankenstein monster was. He just wanted to exist. He just wanted to have equal rights. But when he fought for it, you know, people went against him, and, you know, he was treated, well, really badly. I haven't read the novel, but from the notes it tells you, you know, and you know, if you've seen any sort of film on Frankenstein, the story is pretty similar. Obviously, if you've seen Van Helsing, that's probably a more recent, I say more recent, it's still a good 20 years old, but the way the Frankenstein monster is treated in that film, and she, you know, it's you're looking at whether that's comparable to how a woman at the time of Mary Wollstonecraft would have been treated if she were to go against societal norms. So all in all, very interesting. So next, Unit 6 is an English literature module, and you are looking at Charles Dickens, or more precisely, A Christmas Carol, so his little short novella, A Christmas Carol. So I mentioned in one of the videos that you do need to purchase this book. I wasn't sure if it was going to be a case of they'd give you extracts in the module material and just work from that. But unfortunately, in a lot of bits, it says go to this page and this paragraph and read, you know, this paragraph, 2 paragraphs, read a page, read 2 pages. So you are going to need the book for that one, unfortunately. However, with the 3 books that you do need for the module, they're spread out quite a bit. So obviously Unit 6 is the first time you're going to need the book, and that's The Christmas Carol. And then I think the next book is The Favourite Book of Beasts, which is the poetry book, and that's not going to be for another 4, 5, 6 weeks. So if you want to buy them separately, you could buy one month, one the next month. You're going to be okay doing that because they're not in quick succession. So first is a bit of a background on Charles Dickens, and then also you're quickly looking at narrating. So because it's an English literature module, how Charles Dickens narrates his books compared to other people. So it draws you into the first paragraph of A Christmas Carol and how it introduces you to the story, or how Dickens introduces you to the story and to the characters. And you're also comparing the works of Dickens to other authors at the time. You look at various features through the book, from Dickens' use of ghosts, which were quite popular in the Victorian era, especially like for books and so forth. It was quite a popular concept that ghosts existed, and, you know, people enjoyed reading about that sort of thing. You look at his use of children, and then you also look at how Dickens' work, The Christmas Carol especially, was produced for the stage. And that's not just stage productions of A Christmas Carol, but also readings. So Charles Dickens, especially in the later on in his life, was quite famous and made more money from doing public readings of A Christmas Carol. It is said that that's probably what caused his demise near the end of his life, because he was working flat out doing all these public readings, not just around the country, but he did quite a few in America as well. But you look at how he himself translated his own work for the stage doing public readings, what he would cut out of the novel, what he would add, how he would deliver certain parts of the book as well. So that's quite interesting. You look at modern takes on that as well. There's a famous actor, I haven't written it down, but who also does A Christmas Carol, and he follows Dickens' kind of cut for the performance, but he has his own parts that he adds or takes out of the actual novel. So you look at that, and I'm going to be quite honest, at the beginning, I don't know if you saw my first video where I said that I was interested in doing English literature and history as a dual sort of specialism for the degree. And this is a good thing about A111, because now I've done this, I didn't really enjoy it that much. So it's quite objective. Like, obviously how you interpret a book is how you interpret a book. Yes, there's ways you can be taught on what to look out for when you're reading something and how it's written, but all in all, like, for me, it's all very like, well, what do you think of that, and how do you interpret that? And oh no, that just did my head in. Like, I've enjoyed reading the book and I enjoyed reading the material, but yeah, I think that English literature is not for me. After doing this unit, I'm going to still give it a go going forward. I'm going to do the poetry one unit. I'm not going to skip that. And near the end, there's another English lit module unit, in the third book. So I won't skip those. I will do them, because maybe this is just a blip. But yeah, it was interesting, but it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I mean, I know you're interpreting the works of someone and how they, use their words to create atmosphere, to create characters, but yeah, like, not as interesting as I thought it was going to be. So Unit 7 is an art history unit, and you're looking at the work of Van Gogh, Van Gogh, or Van Gogh. We're just going to call him Van Gogh for now. Anyway, so it is once again quite interesting, but not as interesting as I thought it was going to be. So far, history is what is really grabbing me in. Art history is a lot about interpreting the works of the artist. I thought it was going to be more, while there is aspects of the history behind the art and the art movements of the time, this unit itself is very much talking about, the styles Van Gogh used, how he was different from other artists at the time, and maybe that's why he wasn't as famous at the time. He struggled during his lifetime to get any recognition, because he would go against the grain of what was considered art at the time. The art academies of the time didn't like the sort of work Van Gogh was doing. So I actually went to the Van Gogh Museum last year, and I'm kind of wishing that I'd gone after I'd studied this unit, because I would have probably had a bit more appreciation, because I was walking around and seeing stuff like the potato eaters. I haven't got a picture of that, but I might put one up if I've got it. So when I saw it in the museum, I was just like, that's really random. But when you're actually reading the material and you look at the potato eaters, you realise that he went through this peasant painter stage of his life. And even though his family were nowhere near peasants, they were quite well off, he portrayed himself as the painter of peasants, and he therefore wanted to immerse himself in that life. So he would dress quite poorly, almost like a peasant, and then portray their lives through his art. So in terms of how Van Gogh used to paint, and the style of painting is quite consistent for a lot of his works. So I actually got these from the museum. I quite like them. So this is obviously quite famous sunflowers. What you actually learn, which I didn't realise, is that he did a number of versions of this. Up to 10 or 12 versions. Like, he'd paint one and then he'd paint another one and he'd paint another one. All very similar, but different versions. Obviously at the time there was no sort of way to like this, print them or do anything like that, apart from repainting them. So with Van Gogh's work, you see like the way he uses hard brush strokes and added brush strokes to create texture. So you look at that, like with other art at the time, what was considered popular, you had to blend your brush strokes so they weren't actually visible on the painting, whereas Van Gogh really liked to use quite harsh brushstrokes so you could see them, and that was one of the reasons that he wasn't considered a popular artist at the time, because he went against the grain of what people actually liked and what people bought. So another popular painting he did, which illustrates the previous point on brushstrokes, is one of his self-portraits. So he did a number of self-portraits, but this is one of the famous ones. They're all quite famous, to be fair, but you can see the individual brushstrokes he uses to create the atmosphere and to create some sort of texture as well. So you're learning all about that. It is quite fascinating, but to me, yeah, once again, quite objective. I'm not overly objective. Like, I love writing essays, but I love writing them on things that I know and research that I've done and reading that I've done. But having to look at something and make my own mind up about it based on principles, it's not something I really enjoyed. Like, I say not enjoyed. I enjoyed the unit, but it's not something I want to look at going forward anyway. Also, you learn about his obsession. When he moved to the south of France, he became obsessed with sort of, well, Japan in general, but also Japanese prints. So he used to produce his own sort of Japanese prints. Don't know, ask me why we got this. These are only the 3 prints that I bought, and this was one of them. But you do look at why he produced Japanese prints and his love for Japanese art forms as well. So that is Unit 7 on Van Gogh. Once again, these obviously, I wouldn't call them reviews as such, but these are just my hot takes on the units that I've studied. To be honest, going forward, I might just do a video every couple of units, because having to recap 4 when I studied the first one probably over a month ago, it's quite difficult to go over, and you probably notice like I'm skipping bits. And also, I don't want to go too much into detail. I don't want to spoil it if you're going to study this unit in the future. But also, I don't want to teach the course myself, because, you know, that's what the university is there for. But I hope you find it informative and interesting anyway, and if you are looking at studying it, it kind of piques your interest a bit more to actually hit that button and enroll. Enrollment is coming up this month for anyone who wants to start in October. I think it's mid-March. Enrollment usually opens and registration usually opens for the October modules. So I hope it has piqued your interest if you are interested in studying A111 or any sort of arts and humanities subject. So next, that kind of ends my study of the Reputations book. Next, I'll be going on to the Traditions book. I've already kind of looked and decided that I'm probably going to skip the music unit, which is like the second unit, which is on the blues. No offense to the blues, but yeah, I haven't enjoyed studying music. Also, I'm studying the A-level alongside this degree, so I'm kind of trying to organise my time around giving a fair amount of time to each, but if I don't need to study a music unit, I'm not going to study it. And so I think the first unit I'll study in that is going to be the one on sculptures from the classical world, so ancient Greece, ancient Rome. I think most of them are ancient Greek sculptures, and how the traditions associated with those sculptures maybe have transcended into current use and are inspiring current artists. TMA 2 is going to be after the Unit 7. I've submitted TMA 1, haven't had it back yet, but TMA 2 is like TMA 1, so you get the option of the 4 units you've studied. So Unit 4, 5, 6 and 7, and you have to pick 2 of them. However, it's slightly different to TMA 1. TMA 1 was pretty much, it wasn't the same question, but it was. So it was basically giving you a source and saying, what does this source tell us about their reputation? So obviously the sources were different, but you were still writing about what those sources said about the person's reputation. Whereas looking at the next TMA, the options are a bit more different. So you're listening to music for the Mozart option and kind of describing the piece of music. For the Mary Wollstonecraft option, there's like a bit of her text and then there's some questions after it. For the Dickens option, you've got a section of the Christmas Carol, and it relates to the last part of the unit where how they translated the novel into a stage adaptation, and it's asking you how you would, perform this particular piece of Christmas Carol, how you would change it, how you would perform it. And Unit 7 for the Van Gogh art history unit, you're given an image and you're told to write about that image. So once again, 4 and 7 I definitely know for me, bit too objective, so I'm kind of stuck with 5 and 6, the Mary Wollstonecraft and Charles Dickens, so that's what I'm going to go with. Haven't planned it yet, but that's probably what I'm going to do. So that is my little brief recap on units 4 to 7. Sorry, it's been a ramble as usual, but that's what you expect from me by now. Next video, once again, I haven't even started studying the first unit in the Traditions book, so could be a month away or so. Hope you've enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Until next time.